Right, good afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. Question 1 is Russell George.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of urgent healthcare in Mid-Wales?
Yes, we're committed to ensuring patients in Wales receive safe, sustainable and high-quality urgent healthcare in a timely manner and in the most appropriate setting.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister. As you will know, that services in Shropshire are being subject to review, with initial proposals including the creation of an emergency centre for the treatment of serious injuries. The centre will be supported by between 4 and 7 urgent care centres, but unfortunately, despite cross-border agreements, none of these are in Montgomeryshire. Will you commit to exploring the feasibility of an urgent care centre to serve the 63,000 people living in my constituency?
Well, we always give consideration to such things, but of course what is absolutely crucial is your constituents are able to access health services in England as they always have done. They are not, to use the phrase of the moment, refugees. They are people who have always used the health service in England, as there are people who use the health service in Wales who come from England. And I certainly hope that any changes, now that Shropshire, of course, have come out of the difficulties that they faced a short while ago, will be of benefit to the people of Montgomeryshire. And I'm sure that the Health Minister will give consideration to what else needs to be done in the future in order to improve their medical care, such as, for example, what we're doing with the Emergency Medical Retrieval and Transfer Service.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As you know, First Minister, Plaid Cymru has consistently called for increased numbers of doctors in Wales and the recruitment of up to 1,000 additional doctors. Now, pro tem in England, the College of Emergency Medicine has been part of a specific recruitment drive to ensure that there is adequate emergency care available in that context. Is that part of the recruitment campaign that you're carrying out here with the colleges?
Well, we have been working with the colleges in order to ensure that there are a sufficient number of doctors in Wales, as the member would expect us to do. And of course, we know that approximately 96% of jobs have already been filled.
To Mohammed Ashgar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's policies to promote digital inclusion in Wales, please?
Yes, the Digital Inclusion Delivery Plan was updated in the summer. This reflected on the good progress that has been made Llywyd in promoting digital inclusion, and of course it remains a fundamental part of our programme for government.
Thank you for the reply, Minister. According to the Disability Wales, an estimated 40% of disabled people do not have access to the internet, compared to just 12% of non-disabled people in Wales. They are concerned that moving public services online mean many disabled people are prevented from accessing them. What action will his government take to help disabled people get access to digital services here in Wales?
Well, a lot of the services that are moving online are doing so as a result of his party's policies, but I'm not sure to remind him of that. But I can offer the member some comfort. Communities 2.0, of course, has helped 50,000 individuals since its inception. Disabled people and older people have been helped by it. And I can say, Llywyd, that Communities 2.0 has worked in close partnership with key disabled people's groups to help disabled people to benefit their lives through technology. For example, I was pleased to hear that the RNIB have bid successfully for the Lottery's Basic Online Skills funding, and that was based on a Communities 2.0 project that was developed in Wales.
Mike Hedges.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister agree with me that the provision of broadband connections to the internet within libraries is a major contribution to digital inclusion?
Yes, I do. We know that libraries play a vital role in tackling digital exclusion. They provide the free community access that so many people need in a safe environment, and of course assistance to those who are not familiar with digital technology, and particularly with the internet. And of course, one of the most pleasing developments that there have been over the past few years is the expansion of libraries into digital technology to enable people to use their services as fully as possible.
Claire Griffith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Farmers now, of course, do have to use online services to claim payments and so on. Now, that shift is a positive one, but the reality is that some of these areas will be the last to actually have access to broadband. You therefore believe that it would be reasonable to retain an element of paper application for those that are most excluded?
Well, we're in a position where we're drawing to a position where everything will be done online, and that is true of farmers, of course. And each exchange will be transformed by September of next year. They believe that 96% of buildings will then have access to broadband, and then we'll then have to consider what to do with the remaining 4%.
Diolch, Clywyd. First Minister, quite rightly, digital literacy and internet access are crucial to everyday life now, not just in terms of workplace skills, but in access for everyday tasks, and therefore I fully support Communities 2.0. But do you agree with me, First Minister, that it is crucial that we ensure that there is joined-up working between schemes like Communities 2.0 and our Superfast Cymru broadband rollout to make sure that those in our most disadvantaged communities are not left out of the digital advances?
Indeed so, I couldn't agree more. That is vital. We know, of course, that for many people, once their interest is stimulated, they go on and take full advantage then, of course, of improved digital services, particularly those that Superfast broadband can provide. And for me, the two of them run very much together.
We now move to questions of the party leaders. And first this afternoon, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, your budget that was laid 2 weeks ago meted out special treatment for the rural affairs element of that budget. It had a cut of nearly 18% and 20% cut for animal health in that particular budget. Why was rural affairs singled out for such special treatment in that budget?
It wasn't. Farmers, of course, continue to receive the subsidies, over £200 million a year from the European Union. And these have been very difficult times, of course, for the government here in Wales, and we've had to take difficult decisions in order to provide the extra money for health, which I'm sure he will welcome.
Of course, we welcome any additional money for health, and it's something we've been telling you from the start of this Assembly, First Minister. But only 12 weeks ago, your then Minister for Rural Affairs launched a food and drink strategy that aimed for a 30% growth in output, a 10% growth in GVA for the rural economy, and ultimately, 12 weeks later, your government has signalled a near 20% cut in that particular budget. Can you not understand why people feel rather bemused in the rural economy that such, in fairness, positive signals are given 1 week and then such negative signals are given another week? Isn't your government all over the place on this?
No, we have to take difficult decisions, as he will know. We haven't taken the decision to cut education by 20%, as he wanted, or indeed local government by 12%, as he wanted, or indeed social services by 12%, as he wanted. But I understand, of course, that cuts have to come somewhere. We've had cuts of 10% in our budget from his party over the last 4 years, and that has meant that difficult decisions have had to be made. We will continue to promote, of course, Welsh food and drink around the world, as we always have done, and as evidenced by the fact that the food hall, the Royal Welsh Show, continues to grow and new buildings are needed every year.
First Minister, someone who is very intricately related to the Royal Welsh Show, as my father was one of the directors. I know full well that the success of the Royal Welsh Show is based on the volunteers and the people who put their hands in their pockets to pay for it, rather than any initiatives that you might be trying to bandwagon on. The fact of the matter is, First Minister,
Order! I want to hear what the
government, for some unknown reason, and I'm quite happy to say the food and drink sector has been a notable success. It accounts for nearly 20% of manufacturing jobs here in Wales. It has an aim of £7 billion growth by 2020. These are all laudable aims, and only 12 weeks ago you were trying to encapsulate that in a plan, but then you're doing this to the budget. None of it seems to make sense. You seem to be chasing the press releases 1 minute and actually ducking the difficult questions the next. Why are you turning your back on the rural economy? But importantly, why are you turning your back on creating those jobs in the food and drink sector that the rural economy will desperately need to raise the GVA we all want to see, and above all, the overall output of the rural economy?
I think he misunderstands the point I was making. Over the last decade, I have seen the numbers of producers increase exponentially in Wales, to the extent that the Royal Welsh Show has difficulty accommodating them, which is a good thing, of course, for the industry itself. I expect that to continue in the future. Nevertheless, it is true to say that there have been cuts in budgets across government, apart from, of course, in health. But we cannot create money where money does not exist. We've received a 10% cut over 4 years from his party, and we have to prioritise in the way that we think the people of Wales would want us to prioritise. That has meant, of course, finding more money for the NHS and shielding the people of Wales from the worst cuts that he wanted to impose with his shadow budget 3 years ago.
We now move to questions from the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, yesterday the second report by the Social Mobility and Child Poverty Commission was published. On vocabulary standards, it states that at the age of 3, Scotland has the highest scores. It goes on to say, but by the age of 5, children in England have closed that gap with Scotland, but children in Wales are falling behind. First Minister, when do you believe the actions taken by your government will enable Welsh children to perform the same as children in Scotland and in England?
Well, first of all, of course, the report praised Flying Start, the work that has done in order to assist so many of our young people. I have no doubt that Pupil Deprivation Grant will assist, and that, of course, is a policy that it's right to say originated with her party and one that we've been able to take forward working with her. And I can say that the revised child poverty strategy, which will be published for consultation next month, will seek to address those issues in order to ensure that we in Wales certainly are not left behind.
Minister, Flying Start has existed for a number of years now, but the evidence suggests that Wales's children are not catching up. It's all very well having a programme, but if the programme doesn't deliver improvements, then it's really not helping our children. Those poorest children will then go on to suffer poorer GCSE results. Just 26% of children eligible for free school meals achieve 5 good GCSEs, including English and Maths, compared to 38% of similar children in England. Now, the report says, and I quote, that situation is unacceptable and means that too many children in Wales are being let down by the existing school system, and change is urgently needed. Now, apart from agreeing, as you've stated, to implement the Welsh Liberal Democrat Pupil Deprivation Grant, what are you going to do to ensure that Wales gets the change that Alan Milburn says is so urgently required?
Through the Pupil Deprivation Grant, of course, through the Child Poverty Strategy, through the foundation phase, which is yet, of course, to work through fully in terms of the beneficial effect it will have on our young people. We know, of course, it's important as well to support more young people into higher education. We know that the rate of young people going into higher education has increased. These things do take, of course, some time to work through, but nevertheless we are clear that we have a child poverty strategy and actions on the ground that will ensure that the young people of Wales are not left behind.
3 weeks ago, I highlighted the abandonment of your long-cherished PISA target as another example of the poverty of ambition that characterises much of your approach. Now, yesterday, Alan Milburn agreed with that, and he said, and I quote again, "We are concerned about the lack of ambition in the new international target set for 2020. We do not think that they are aspirational enough given the scale of the issue that faces Wales." I ask you again, First Minister, why can't you and your administration strive for excellence instead of aiming for mediocrity?
We never aim for mediocrity. Those of us who have been through the state system and are grateful for the opportunities it afforded to us will never lose sight of that. It is something that is very close to my heart in terms of looking after children particularly, and we are moving forward with plans to help them. In terms of ensuring that our schools have the support and money they require, and Schools Challenge Cymru is one of the most effective ways of making sure that those who come from the most deprived backgrounds are able to get the help that they need. We've invested in new facilities, new schools across Wales at a rate far in excess of what is happening in England. We are seeing the gap in terms of performance closing, and closing, I believe, rapidly. We have the strategy, as I said, that's being announced next week, and we have, of course, the Pupil Deprivation Grant. All these things, I believe, will see a real and beneficial improvement for our young people over the next few years.
And finally, Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, neither of us will take pleasure in the Tory press trying to turn our health service into a political football. But patients in Wales will be alarmed, and they have genuine concerns that deserve to be taken seriously and addressed in full. One question that is asked is, why do waiting times for diagnostic tests remain unacceptably long in Wales compared to Scotland and England? Do you attribute this to funding alone, or do you accept that there are wider issues?
I think there are issues of demand. We have provided £6.5 million of diagnostics, £425 million extra, of course, to the NHS. Demand does increase at a huge rate. That's not entirely true just of Wales, of course, but nevertheless it is something we face. We have a higher proportion of older people. We have a higher proportion of people who are not in good health. And of course, we don't have the £300 million that a funding reform would give us. Now, I don't pretend in any way to say that the Welsh NHS doesn't have its difficulties. It clearly does. It clearly does. We as a government are committed to dealing with those difficulties. What we won't do, though, is play politics with the issue of people's health.
Surely, First Minister, if demand has increased, it will have increased everywhere, and surely you won't deny the facts. 1% waited over 6 weeks for an MRI scan in England last August. Just over 2% waited longer than 6 weeks in Scotland for an MRI scan. Over 40% waited longer than 6 weeks here in Wales. Aren't we now at a point, though, where, as well as patients having serious concerns, our health workers are increasingly demoralised too?
Well, I think constant attacks from papers outside Wales will demoralise them. And I can say that the Minister has written to them all today just to say to them that these aren't the views of the Welsh Government. But what I can say, of course, let's not minimise the difficulties that exist in some parts of the health service. They're there. I don't pretend in any way that the health service in Wales is perfect, but it's not in England. We only saw last week Hereford County Hospital being described as inadequate and unsafe. And many Welsh patients go to Hereford County Hospital from Eastern Breconshire. But let me give you some examples of a recent survey that was carried out where it was said there were countless examples of outstanding practice. 9 times out of 10, the care patients receive is exceptional. The vast majority of the sample group were happy with the level of care they received. 77% of people in Monmouthshire, for example, felt their GP's surgery offered convenient appointments, higher than any other part of Wales, and 74% of respondents reported high standards of cleanliness in the hospital environment. Those are some examples of what I would say that the vast majority of people get the best care most of the time. And what we must focus on is ensuring that those people who don't get the level of care that they should expect, that those concerns are dealt with, and we ensure that the numbers of people in that category continue to drop.
The First Minister should take very seriously his responsibilities to both patients and staff in the Welsh Health Service. He will be fully aware that a strike ballot resulted in 4-1 in favour of strike action by Unison members in the Welsh Health Service. Does the First Minister agree with Unison that our health workers are worth more than the one-off £160 payment that's being offered to them by this government?
Well, first of all, negotiations continue to take place, as the member would expect. These are difficult times because we know that even though that more money has been allocated for health, we must make sure that a substantial amount of that money goes on services. And it is difficult, of course, in the financial circumstances that we find ourselves in to ensure that that happens. But let's not prejudge things. There's already been a strike in England and Northern Ireland. Discussions will continue in Wales. I know the Health Minister will continue to do that. Incidentally, the quotations that I gave you in terms of satisfaction were from the Conservative Health Survey. So even their own survey tends to undermine what they have been saying. But I do accept, and I thank the Leader of Plaid Cymru in the way that she's raised these issues. They are important issues, and from time to time we must deal with difficult questions in the NHS. But she has done it in such a way that has not turned this into a political football, unlike, of course, the Daily Mail and the Department of Health.
Can I just remind members that some people have their names down to speak later on. So if they can not stop muttering, they won't be called. Question 3, Ellen Jones.
What measures can the Welsh Government take to safeguard the agricultural industry in light of recent falls for many farm incomes?
Well, we know that during the past financial year, farmers' incomes had increased by 32%, but it's true to say that there was a fall in the price of lamb. But may I say, too, that a summit will take place on beef, together with a review of the dairy industry to consider what more could be done.
First Minister, you will know that many of our dairy farmers are facing very unpredictable prices and prices that are currently falling, and those prices are often impacted by the global price for milk. But in order to stabilise the situation of our dairy farmers over the longer term, do you think that it's now time to look towards compulsory contracts between farmers and milk processors in order to maintain stability. And now 12 member states within the EU have actually gone down that particular route, and I hope that you as government will also look at this.
Well, one of the weaknesses, of course, is what happened with the MMB. Once that went, there were huge problems for dairy farmers. I would be in favour of giving greater powers to dairy farmers, but it's nothing that we can't do that through the compulsory contracts because it's a commercial matter. But I understand very well that it's very difficult when an individual is selling to a major company. That's where the weakness lies. So that anything that empowers farmers, then I would be very supportive of. If there is a way of ensuring that farmers get a fair price through the contracts that they sign, then that's something that we as a government would consider, bearing in mind the barriers and obstacles within the powers that we have.
George?
First Minister, the red meat industry in Wales is losing around 1 million every year. As a result of the way in which the promotional levy works in practice. Do you agree that a North Wales abattoir and reform of the meat promotional levy are ways in which we can ensure we keep money in Wales and reinvest to support our farmers? And can I ask, how is the Welsh Government working with the UK Government to bring this about?
Well, the UK Government have indicated no interest in this area. They tend, of course, to support the bigger farmers, particularly arable. We know that from experience over the last decade. In terms of red meat, of course, we know the price of lamb has dropped recently. That's because it's been a very good summer, and there's been a level of oversupply in the market, together, of course, with the strength of the pound, which never helps in terms of exports. In terms of beef, we know that cattle prices have shown signs of improvement throughout last month and this month. But of course, what we will continue to do is, as we have done successfully over the past decade or so, is to promote Welsh red meat. And that, of course, has led us to new markets ahead of other parts of the UK in years gone by.
William Powell?
Diolch, Llywydd. Returning for a moment to the issue of the dairy sector, First Minister, it's been the case that in other areas, for example, free-range eggs, and also through the Red Tractor scheme, there's been great benefit derived to the industry in terms of increasing loyalty from customers who are prepared to pay an additional amount for a reliable quality product. Do you think that there is in fact scope for this to be extended more in the dairy sector to actually provide greater resilience to the industry, which at this moment is facing such difficult times?
Yes, I do. Branding is the key for farming in Wales. If we competed purely in terms of commodities, as a commodity, we'd be wiped out by producers who will always be able to compete at a level far below what our farmers are able to do, New Zealand being one example of it. So the key for us is getting over that problem by having a high-quality product that is branded and marketed aggressively. It's happening now with milk. We see it now on the shelves, where we have, for example, Cwnsler Llawn as an organic producer, and of course the non-organic Welsh branded milk that we see in our supermarkets. In an entirely non-scientific survey, I do notice in Bridgen's supermarkets that the milk from Wales goes first, and that of course I very much welcome, but that of course is a small market. What we need to do as well, of course, is to promote Wales as a brand, an international brand, to make sure that the market goes beyond the Welsh market. Trickier with milk, because of course liquid milk doesn't travel in the same way as processed dairy products, but nevertheless it's very heartening to see that Welsh milk is now being differentiated and branded. But at the end of the day, there are still problems, and those problems revolve around how does an individual get a fair price from a big buyer. Since the Milk Marketing Board was destroyed, that question still remains unanswered by successive UK governments.
Question 4, Jenny Rathbone.
What work is the Welsh Government doing to protect young people from online sexual abuse?
Well, we continue to work with the National Crime Agency and the police to target and arrest perpetrators of online sexual abuse as part of national and international investigations. And here in Wales, we are educating parents and children to recognise and respond to inappropriate online behaviour.
Recent Cardiff University research indicates that young people as young as 13 are being pressurised to have sex. And in the most serious cases, young people are being groomed online to enter into prostitution. Now, the Sexual Offences Act 2003 predates the widespread use of the internet, And the current offence of grooming requires an offender to set out on a journey to meet a child. In light of yesterday's announcement that the National Crime Agency finds it unrealistic to chase the 50,000 people who've engaged in online child abuse, what work do you think our government can do to respond to the NSPCC call for further legislation? They're calling obviously on the UK government to take further action to protect young people. But if the UK government doesn't take action, what could be done, for example, to amend the Violence Against Women bill to ensure that this is addressed?
We have to bear in mind, of course, first of all, that there are limits on what we can do, given the fact that there are limits on the maximum sentences that we can create under the criminal law. So inevitably, the UK government will have stronger powers, unlike, of course, in Scotland, where it is different, and Northern Ireland in this area. Can we say we welcome the UK government's proposed amendments in the Criminal Justice and Courts Bill? That will, for example, reduce the number of initial occasions when a perpetrator must meet or communicate with children from 2 to 1 in order for an offence to be created. So that is if I can put it this way, the easiest way of making sure that this issue is dealt with through the criminal justice system. However, in terms of our own bill, the Gender-Based Violence, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Wales Bill, there is work underway in terms of ensuring that we can promote healthy relationships in the future, and of course to address violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. When it comes to the criminal side, it's inevitable that the UK government will have more powers than us, but we will work with them, of course, in order to make sure that our children are safe.
Jonathan Saunders.
There are 2 to 3 teenagers now in the UK, including Wales, reporting experiences of trolling, online bullying and sexual abuse. The UK Government Minister, the Right Honourable Chris Grayling MP, has actually now made announcements that he's going to impose higher fines and indeed take sentences up from 6 months to 2 years for very serious accounts. Will the First Minister join me in welcoming this positive initiative, and will you pledge your support to working with the UK Government on this issue that is really affecting so many of our young people now here in Wales?
Yes, that's an important point the member raises, and I can say that we will work, of course, with the UK government to ensure that our young people, particularly young teenagers, who are perhaps at their most vulnerable time of life in many, many ways, certainly in terms of their development, that they receive the full protection that they should be entitled to.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, you may have seen this morning that an online avatar called Sweetie, created by the Dutch charity Ter de Hom to identify paedophiles who use online chat rooms, has secured its first conviction. That man was an Australian, but the charity involved has said that it has passed 110 British men. It identified the National Crime Agency. So I'm just wondering whether you as a government are aware that any of those men are Welsh, and whether you have had any dealings with the police to see how we can progress this, because I listened to BBC Radio 4 this morning, and they were saying by the charity that one arrest simply isn't good enough.
I'm not aware of any convictions of anybody from Wales, but I think it's an important issue, and there are issues of detail that the member will need to know. If I write to the member with further information, I think that hopefully will provide her with answers to the question that she's asked.
Question 5, Mick Anthony.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister give an assessment of the potential for economic cooperation between Wales and South West England?
Yes, I understand the Cardiff Capital Region Board are continuing to consider appropriate opportunities to build linkages beyond the Cardiff Capital Region, and that would inevitably mean not just looking west, but east across the Severn as well.
Well, thank you for the answer, First Minister. There are already significant academic, economic, transport and energy links between Wales and the South West. Do you agree with me that should there be devolution to the regions of England, that this would actually open the door to tremendous new opportunities for joint economic and social cooperation?
It might well do that. At the moment, it's difficult to do it, of course. The English authorities are smaller and have far fewer powers, with some exceptions, Manchester, of course, being one cluster of authorities where they have worked very well together. So it may well be that if there were to be, for example, regional devolution in England, that those linkages could be strengthened. Nevertheless, there are examples of cooperation between Cardiff and Bristol. For example, Cardiff and Bristol airports have worked together in terms of working to develop plans for hosting big sporting events in the future, with the understanding, of course, that both airports are well able to bring in the crowds.
Aaron Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, leading on from that then, I'm sure you've been briefed, if not read the remarks of the Bristol Mayor, George Ferguson, about Cardiff and the Bristol regions needing to work together. The Mayor suggested the creation of a 7 region to provide a strong lobbying voice and critical mass to secure investment. Will you outline your government's position of cross-border cooperation and specifically whether you support the 7 region in principle?
Well, we've done it, of course, in the North East and the linkages with Merseyside, and that's something that we accept. The economic region in any set of countries goes beyond mere political boundaries, that much is true, and we look to work with our neighbours across the border whenever we can. It's quite difficult, of course, because there's no equivalent body, certainly in the southwest of England, that we can work with. There is a putative body in the northwest of England, that much is true, but it would certainly be more useful from our point of view if we were able to work with a cluster of authorities, but of course we'll work with authorities such as Bristol where we can for the mutual benefit of both.
Rhynab Iorwerth.
Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Agree that the 7 bridge tolls is a tax on Welsh businesses, that it should be devolved to Welsh Government, and that Plaid Cymru's proposal to cut the toll to £2 for cars with the corresponding cuts for commercial vehicles would be an important step towards levelling the playing field between businesses in Wales and the southwest of England.
Yes, I do, very much so. Indeed, the member will know some months ago we declared very publicly that we believe that the tolls should be in the hands of the Welsh Government. We believe that we could reduce the tolls. At the same time, of course, it was important to raise enough money for the maintenance of the bridges, not just the one bridge, but the two bridges. They come together. Of course, at the time, the view of the Department of Transport was that they would control the tolls, the level of the tolls, and all the income from the tolls would be spent on roads in England. As the member can imagine, this was not something that found favour with us as a government. It's important that the money that those tolls raise is applied for the maintenance of the bridges, and of course that we are able to look at reducing the tolls in order to reduce the burden on Welsh business. He's quite right that when the tolls come back to public ownership, it is absolutely essential that it does not come back to the public ownership solely of Whitehall.
Ellen Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. Thank Rhynab Iorwerth for raising the issue of the tolls, though I'm disappointed that he only wants to cut it to 4 times the cost of maintenance. According to a Welsh Government report published in November 2012, scrapping the tolls altogether would boost the Welsh economy by £107 million a year, and the operating costs of the bridges are just £12 million a year, including the cost of collecting the tolls themselves. So with a likely return on investment of 9 to 1, wouldn't you agree that scrapping the 7 tolls altogether would be a cost-effective way to boost the Welsh economy if control of the bridges were devolved?
I have to say to the member that the Department of Transport has produced wildly varying estimates on the maintenance cost of the bridge. 12 million, I've seen 20 million, I've seen higher than that. The first thing we'd have to do is establish what the true cost is of maintenance of the 2 bridges, and then of course take a sensible decision as to what is affordable, what we can offer to Welsh businesses, while at the same time not taking on board a significant liability which at this present time would be difficult for us to afford. So firstly, there needs to be an understanding of what the true cost of maintenance of the bridges actually is. There would need to be surveys to make sure that structurally the bridges were sound, and then of course an assessment can be made on what the level of the toll should be.
Question 6, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the implications for Wales of the Scottish referendum?
Well, significant is the word that I've used to the member. Of course, there is a motion before us at 5 o'clock, roughly this afternoon, that deals with constitutional reform. But what is absolutely crucial is that the aspirations and views of all 4 nations within this union are met, with Wales playing its full part.
Will the First Minister also agree that an important part of the debate in Scotland was about fairness in terms of the distribution of political power, but also in terms of socio-economic factors, and that as the future of the UK is now to be determined, we need that fairness argument to be at the heart of the debate. And that is about new levers for Welsh Government and new support from UK Government to help build our economy. And that also applies to Scotland, the north of England and other parts of England. And if we don't have that fairness, the people of the UK are not going to value the UK and give it the support it needs in the future.
I entirely agree. I mean, the member has raised before the issue of the UK government needing to rebalance the UK economy. He will, of course, share my deep concern at the UK government's proposals to create redundancies in HMRC in the west of our nation. But what is absolutely crucial is that there is a new constitutional settlement, a new union for the UK in order to make sure it is sustained in the future. If that doesn't happen, I have severe concerns about the future of the union. It must be understood in Whitehall that carrying on in the same old way is inadequate over the course of the next decade. We must have a constitutional settlement that's fair, that's settled, and takes into account the views of all.
First Minister, I wonder if you could tell us what discussions you've had with the Office of Budget Responsibility about the enhanced role that they will be playing following the next Assembly election and in the wake of the Scottish referendum, with tax powers that are going to be coming to Wales after that next election. In the case of stamp duty, for instance, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that the forecasts have to be exactly right or near enough, because that will then be determine the amount that the block grant is reduced. So they are going to play an increasingly important role in Scotland. I wonder if you could tell us what discussions you've had about their role here.
Yes, there have been discussions at official level with the OBR, and of course we're looking to see what role the OBR could play as we accumulate tax varying powers. Absolutely crucial, as the member says, that we're able to have a robust mechanism in place to assess and predict the tax take, and of course a mechanism for ensuring that the methods that we use are robust, and the OBR of course may well play a role in that regard.
Alan Fair-Jones.
Thank you very much. One outcome of the referendum was the vow by 3 UK lead political readers was that there wouldn't be any change to the Barnett formula, which locks Wales into underfunding, as you've said a number of times, and that too is UKIP's view on this. Were you part of any discussions before that declaration was made?
No. I didn't speak to the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister. I did speak to Ed Miliband, that's true. But it was something that was done in a slight panic, bearing in mind what the opinion polls were saying in Scotland at that time. Now, of course, nobody knows quite what's going to happen at the end of the month, but what's apparent in my view is that that vow has been made to Scotland, and that has to be actually kept in Scotland. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a fair settlement to Wales, and that should progress also, and we have had that commitment from Ed Miliband to ensure that.
No, 7, Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government policy on school absences?
Well, of course, we all take absence from schools seriously. There is strong evidence to show that it does affect adversely an individual learner's attainment. And for that reason, of course, attendance does need to remain a priority to ensure that children and young people are given the chance to achieve their potential.
Answer, First Minister. You will, of course, be aware of the advice from the Central South Consortium, which covers parts of my region and your constituency, that parents should be sending children to school when they're suffering from illnesses such as glandular fever and tonsillitis, as well as infectious conditions such as conjunctivitis, slapped cheek and hand, foot and mouth. Are you as concerned as I, First Minister, at this advice being given out to parents, particularly when a parent contacted me today to say that last week when she kept her child home, the school truancy officer called round, but when she sent the child in today, the school sent the child home because they were not able to administer antibiotics to them. How is this consortium accountable, and how can it be scrutinised for these sorts of decisions which seem to go against common sense for many parents?
I'm not aware of that. I have 2 children, of course, who live within that consortium. I've not seen that advice myself. I'm sure I would have noticed it if I had. But I will ensure that the Minister writes to the member in order to provide clarification on this point. There does seem to be an element of confusion there in terms of what the advice is, and it's important that advice is clarified.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. First Minister, absence from school remains persistently higher in our deprived communities such as South Wales valleys and inner cities. What steps his government has taken to discover and to tackle the root causes of absenteeism in these particular communities in South Wales?
Well, the reasons for absenteeism can be many and varied, but what's important, of course, is that we've provided money for many schools in our more deprived areas through Schools Challenge Cymru to help them, of course, to address this and other issues, and we expect that, of course, to have a beneficial effect in terms of seeing attendance rates increase.
Roger Glenn Thomas.
Prif Weinidog.
First Minister, the system as it stands offers flexibility to head teachers to grant up to 10 days absence. Do you believe that that flexibility and right should remain with the head teachers?
Well, I can't see any reason why that shouldn't be retained at the moment, in my view. It appears that head teachers are using that flexibility in a sensible way, and therefore there's no evidence, in my opinion, to change the current system.
Question 8, Sandy Movies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What action is the Welsh Government taking to reduce alcohol consumption in Wales?
Well, we've taken a wide range of measures, and they are set out in Working Together to Reduce Harm, which is our strategy for reducing substance misuse.
Thank you. According to Public Health Wales, alcohol is responsible for around 1 in 20 of all deaths in Wales. That's 29 a week. And a higher proportion of children in Wales, aged 11 to 16, are drinking alcohol than in England or Scotland. The Public Health White Paper has consulted on minimum unit pricing for alcohol, and as you know, this has been widely supported. Given the consensus of many people agreeing with this action, when can we see such a move being introduced as a step towards tackling the problem?
Well, the government's view is that minimum unit pricing is something we should move forward with. However, this is now in the European Court of Justice, or the European Court of First Instance, if I remember rightly, because of a challenge to the Scottish Government's proposals from the Scotch Whisky Association, I understand, and others. We now wait to see what the outcome of that judgment would be, because obviously it will have a direct effect on what we might want to do in Wales. So the matter now is, dare I say it, in the hands of the lawyers.
Mark Isherwood.
Thank you, Rachel. Pricing, of course, is linked to supply, but it's the causes of demand that need also to be addressed if we're to nip this in the bud and tackle the horrendous figures we've just heard referred to. In March, the European Court of Audit, after expressing concerns about Welsh Government audit of the substance misuse peer mentoring scheme in Wales, prematurely ended the scheme. Could you provide an update on Welsh Government support utilising the European money for peer mentoring as we go forward?
Well, what I can say to the member is we have a number of schemes in place: the Change for Life alcohol programme, the Have a Word brief interventions programme, the delivery, of course, of the Strengthening Families programme, and, of course, our Healthy Working Wales programme. In addition, our All Wales Schools Core Liaison programme operates in 99% of primary and secondary schools in Wales, and that does include advice for children and young people about alcohol misuse. And we are working to develop a guide to provide parents with some top tips on how to discuss the dangers of alcohol with their children. In the meantime, Public Health Wales have also been asked to consider the processes in place to review alcohol-related deaths, with a view, of course, to improving prevention and response.
Question 9, Aled Roberts.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What discussions did the First Minister have regarding steps to safeguard the Welsh language in the planning bill?
A number of helpful discussions with a variety of stakeholders.
First Minister, you promised to consider every practical step in order to strengthen the Welsh language position within the planning system. Which options were therefore considered, and would you be willing to publish a copy of the options considered by the Planning Department?
What we've said is that we're willing to consider any ideas put forward by other organisations, and I've been discussing, for example, with Dyfodol yr Iaith, and there were some interesting ideas emerging from them, but we have to consider what's practical and what should be placed within a bill rather than within guidance, which is something crucially important in the planning system, and that invitation remains open. We continue to discuss with Dyfodol yr Iaith some of those issues which they have put forward.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, can you tell us what assistance the Welsh Government is offering local authorities to assist them in analysing the data that they collect on the Welsh language, and to what extent is the Welsh language considered in the way in which land is being used within the planning system?
Well, in terms of land, then it is possible for local authorities to ensure that they do carry out a Welsh language impact assessment when they carry out the LDP itself, or draw up the LDP itself, and also it's very important that they consider how out with the planning system they can promote the Welsh language. And I'm thinking particularly here of Carmarthenshire County Council and the commission established there, which was cross-party, and given the history of Carmarthenshire, that hasn't always been easy to have that cross-party working, and they have put recommendations before Carmarthenshire County Council to strengthen the language in an area which is crucial to the future of the language. So there is guidance in the planning system, and we're willing to consider any practical steps that can strengthen the system for the benefit of the Welsh language. And we have assisted local authorities to understand just how important the Welsh language is, and to be fair to them, most of them are aware of that and understand it. And for example, we have ensured that there are schemes and plans in place in terms of Welsh language provision in the education system in all local authorities.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Welsh Government have a very good campaign to do the little things on behalf of the Welsh language, but it's also extremely important that you get the major things right too. And there is an opportunity now for this government to make a statement in the planning bill to put to say exactly where the Welsh language should be in the planning system. I'm sure you can't pretend that you're happy with the Welsh language as it stands in the planning system.
Well, at the moment, we need to consider how the bill itself can strengthen the Welsh language. The door isn't closed to that, but a statement would be meaningless. We have to ensure that a statement is meaningful in a practical sense also. And to date, nobody has shown me that there is any way of providing a role for the Welsh language within the bill which is practically beneficial for the language. And that's what we have to consider for the future. And in saying that, of course, well, we don't think that the planning system is some means of saving the language. It can't do so alone, of course. And I have to make this point. One of the problems is that people are all moving into homes that already exist. So how do you then ensure to use the word that is used very often in terms of the Welsh language? How can we ensure that they're immersed in the language and that their children are immersed? We know that that's worked in Gwynedd, and we hope to see good outcomes in Ceredigion, and it's very important that other authorities in Wales consider that same process or approach. But the planning system itself can't deal with that problem of Welsh speakers either dying or moving out and non-Welsh speakers moving in. We have to find other ways of ensuring that those people can play their part, and a significant part in their bilingual communities.
First Minister, we now move to item 2, which is a business statement.